Alright. Let me get this out there, people. Let me get this out there. Right. Ah, damn. Facebook has changed its... Let me just share this video, people. So... just sharing this, so and then we're good to go. Just un momento. Right. Done. Yeah, lillahi alhamd. Alright. Ahlan wa sahlan, ahlan wa sahlan bikum, people. Ahlan wa sahlan. Right. Inna alhamdulillahi wa kafah. Wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulihi al-Mustafa. Wa ala ibadihi alladhina irtada. Wa man bihudahum ihtada. Wa bi athari ahli al-Madinati iqtafa. Wa ba'd. Fasalamu Allahi ala al-qawm. Ahlan wa sahlan bikum. Marhaban. Bienvenidos a todos. Khush Ahmadid, people. Alright, Monday nights with Mufti. What a week. What a week it's been, man. What a week. Causing up some stirs as always. Alright. Solomon. Que pedo. Alright. So... Salam from Mexico. Alright, Hamza Al-Halaq, are you in Mexico? Orale, that's what I'm talking about. So, Mexico just seems like such a cool place. So does most of South America, actually. People, so much has been going on. There's been a stir. A stir... Can't call it a stir. There's been a tsunami. What can we say? A tsunami explosion. That's what's been going down. And people, some people incredibly disturbed, upset with what I've done. We've got refutations flying around. People cutting and pasting the lies, attributing, making these erroneous allegations against me. So, let's take a look at all of this tonight, inshallah, in addition to your questions. Right, you can't seem to, ahlan wa sahlan, people, like the video, share it, if you can share the link, so others can benefit, inshallah. Robin is saying she can't seem to share the live video. Anybody else having that issue? Can a few of you, would you click share, please? Like and share the video. Let's see. Are there any issues going on? And what I'm going to do is also bring up. Let's see. Hez Jamrak, ahlan wa sahlan. Sham, ahlan wa sahlan. It's very hot. Are there any issues with the share? I can't as well. You can't seem to like or share. Okay. Shared, so it does. Okay, so it's working. Okay, alhamdulillah. The video keeps freezing. Video keeps freezing. Ya salam, don't say that. Don't say that. Is the quality okay, people? Is the quality okay? Is it Momo, ahlan wa sahlan, ahlan wa sahlan. Right, is the Ahmed Siddiqui, is the quality okay, people, or is it not? Because somebody's saying that video is fine. Cool. Okay, it's good to get these reinforcements straight away. Alright, what is going down, people? What is going down? So we've got some questions that have come in, and I'll be taking a look at them. I'll also be dealing with these kind of Sheikh Ahad, Ahlan wa Sahlan. I'll be dealing with some of these kind of false allegations being made because some people are upset about what I've been saying. Well, first of all, I just want to say, if you're upset with what I've been doing, that means I must be doing something right. I must be doing something right. Ahlan wa sahlan, people. Shukran, shukran. Durre Najaf. Ahlan wa sahlan. So, well, if you're upset with what I've been doing, then my news or my response to and for you is, well, I ain't here to please you. I'm here to rock that world of yours. If you feel it's built on firm foundations whilst promoting nonsensical perspectives of the faith, then I feel that is a duty of Muslims, because Islam is for all times and places. Right, so that's I have a new drink. This is actually you see, I love mixing these different. Well, this is Pepsi Max cherry flavor, and this is a variant on Red Bull. So let's get some of this going down now. Right, now I want to highlight, first of all, we have to understand that I've spoken before about things like discourse analysis, how we approach texts. Now, I will, inshallah, in time to come, soon, very soon, within the next few days, release just a, just a video on my own, where I will go into detail about discourse analysis and things like this, and why it's important, especially for people trying to approach the Sharia. Discourse analysis is how you view things with a context, but it's more than just context. So in the past, Usul al-Fiqh does cover some aspects of this, how to approach a text, but today sciences like this, which are part of, you could say part of, falls under or linked to discursive psychology, but also social sciences, this kind of methodology of approaching texts is incredibly important. So the point is, anyway, when you look at things, you have to not just look at context, but also get into the psyche of what is going on. Right, you have to kind of right, okay, Zach Pat. Alright, now that is a troll right there who has revealed his identity to me on a WhatsApp group. So provided you don't troll here, you won't be blocked. But should you troll, then you can meet your fate. Okay, so now, so this discursive psychology or discourse analysis tells you to get into the mind of many things. Okay, so you have to right, so okay, blocked. Right, now, so the thing, the point is that it's not just, it's things like trying to understand the kind of dilemmas that a person may be drawing on, the power positions that they may be implying. We all too often assume language is passive. It is not passive. Okay, language actually is creative and constructive. It constructs our realities. as does memory, by the way, and that's a different discussion I've had in the past about where I've spoken about Bartlett's study of the ghosts and things like this in psychology, which shows and demonstrates that memory is actually constructive and not passive. In a similar way, but much stronger, language definitely creates our reality. People speak from power perspectives. Sheikh Abdul Awwal, Ahlan wa Sahlan, does the video keep freezing? I hope we're not having any issues. In the past there have been some. I'm hoping that the video quality is fine, inshallah. I'll wait for some other people to also respond to that. Now, an example of this is when people, you see, they set a discourse with a power structure. A typical example is like this. Like, imagine I now make a statement like, oh, I always seem to go with the most authentic opinion. You see, now that's a very simple statement, but in it, it denotes a lot of structures, power structures. I'm already kind of implying, putting out there that I have an ability to assess positions, that I already kind of put out there that whatever I do, my views are already the strong positions. You see, just by saying that, I already kind of balance, I place myself in a particular position of power. So it's incredibly important to recognize where people are doing this in their discourse. Another good example for things like this, where people will say these views, so they speak about some of my views, and they will say, oh, to follow, we want you to so this discussion of following shadh. Shadh means, like in Arabic, rare and odd and fringe opinions. You see, the moment, or they'll say rukhsa. A rukhsa means a dispensation, means it's a lenient kind of it's not the norm, it's a dispensation. You're allowed to, so are we allowed to follow this rukhas, this rukhsa? The problem, or I say problem, but the moment I use that wording, I've already put myself in a position of power in trying to denote that, oh, so what you're following is already lacks strength and lacks the mainstream discourse. Do you understand? So before we've even begun a discourse, I've already set it out in a position of power by saying, oh, so following dispensations. What's to state that that view was a dispensation? What's the thing that gives that understanding is just a democracy. It's like saying, well, if there's 10 people here, 9 of them take a particular position, and then they say that that view now is the minority amongst us. So it's a democratic method to arrive at truth. So that's right, so that's something I just want us all to kind of bear in mind, inshallah. Right, how do you cope with the burden of issuing fatawa speaking on behalf of God? I cope with great panache. It's an honor. It's an honor to study this deen and to such depth, to have such training, to help people connect with this lifeline going back to Allah. It's an honor to do that. Allah says, وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ, that connect to this rope of Allah. And this, in essence, I know people say, what could the rope be talking about? But in essence, it just means connect to Allah. And to assist people to do that, right, is somebody trying to troll. Right, anybody trying to troll will be blocked, people, so be aware. Alright, so now that's to Ali Razi, I'm going to address that today as part of this Q&A. Some of these people saying I've misrepresented stuff. But why I've highlighted this is it's important to understand. Okay. It's also important to understand, I want you to grasp something. And this will set the kind of backdrop to what I'm about to say. There's a few things I'd like to highlight. Those of you just tuning in, if you, inshallah, like and share this live feed, get it out there so we can get other people to benefit, inshallah. Any issues, give us a that laugh needs to be copyright. Okay. Shukran, shukran. Right, so let other people benefit as well. So if you've just tuned in, click share. If you've got any questions, post them there and I'll get to them, inshallah. So now, this thing I want us to take as a backdrop is you have to understand, and I've said this before, that Muslims in the West generally, especially within the UK, and heavily in America, but generally, definitely in the UK, our understanding of Islam only comes to us from two key parts of the world. That is it. It, like almost 95% of all of how we understand Islam only comes from two parts of the world. One, Pakistan, or what is associated with Pakistan, the Indo-Pak, but heavily Pakistan, but India, Bangladesh, like that, and then Saudi Arabia. So this is important to understand first of all. Right, so because these two places share a similar kind of, I mean, they're different countries, but they already have a certain way of looking at things. Okay, so that is incredibly important. The other thing is that most of the people that we have today, most of the scholars, most of most of the people, not people as in common Muslims, but the scholars definitely belong to a sect or another. They generally, within the UK, will belong to either, they will be Deobandis, they belong to a Deobandi group, which is part of the Hanafi, Indo-Pak, Hanafi kind of way. They will be Brelvis. So these two are arch rivals from the Indo-Pak, but they're both Hanafi in fiqh, and they both have that Pakistani Indo-Pak heritage. But they are still very, I mean, they at each other's throats all the time. Now, with the Deobandis perhaps more susceptible to influence from the Salafis, less so, the Brelvis absolutely can't tolerate them. Another main group is the Salafis or the Ahlul Hadith. Now it's important to understand that most of the clergy you will find are going to fit into one of these within the UK. Right now, this is an issue. Why is this an issue? Because when you are part of a group, it doesn't matter what you say. You can never truly be 100% objective and independent. It does not matter. If you are part of any group, so if you are a member of a Sufi order which may behave cult-like, and I'm not trying to diss them, but I'm just saying if you are part of a Sufi order that is very structured, then the same rule applies. It is impossible for you to be entirely independent without compromising your allegiance to that group. And for most people, they can't compromise this because their whole life is built around this circle. Their friends are from this circle. They give talks only in these masjids. They have like part of their not only identity but their survival. Sometimes their jobs, their support, their advertising, the people who push them, who promote them, are only this group. So it becomes very difficult to be entirely independent. You may be somebody that has some kind of independence to them, but you can never be truly independent. That's why people like Nietzsche had said that insanity is the exception in individuals, but the norm in groups. Group think is never reason-based. That is what I'm saying now is objective. You can measure this. Like if group think is always about the pack, the group always comes before the individual. Right, so whoever's kind of trying to troll like that, let me get them. Can we have them blocked, please? Please, can we get them blocked? Let me see what's going on. Just put out. So, right, sorry, let me just send out a quick little message here. Right, okay, so shukran. Right, so we've got them blocked. Right, now, so it's important to understand this. Why the angry faces? Because they're upset with what I'm saying. This is going to upset you because most people have an allegiance to a group. And to them, that group is Islam. Islam is not something that incorporates the group. The group incorporates Islam. So they have to at all times validate the group in order for the group to validate them. So this, we have to take this into consideration. So right now when people sometimes get upset with what I'm saying, it's because I'm challenging that group of theirs, that mentality, and they have to please the group, or they have to kind of cope with this kind of the core being shaken of that group. So this is important to understand. Right now, so with that said, shall we take some of these allegations against me? So we've had a lot of people kind of really having a go. They were upset. Let me give you the background to this. Is I did a debunking course, debunking myths. Alright, you hear the sound of that, people. You hear the sound of that. Now, right. Okay, blocked. Let's see who else is. Right, blocked. Right, so, okay, some of those are blocked. Okay, now anybody kind of trolling is going to get blocked. So, I've been releasing some of these videos, which are Q&A videos, on a course that I co-delivered with Sheikh Akram Nadwi, and the main course, the bulk of the course, dealt with jinn possessions, demonic possessions being a myth, and that's going to be released tomorrow, inshallah. So look out for that. The second part of the course dealt with the concept of magic, not, you know, this kind of hocus pocus that unfortunately many Muslims believe in. So that is right, so that is the second part that will be released soon, inshallah. And then we had a Q&A that followed up with several kind of controversial questions which are myths as well. So the first one we released that upset a lot of people was this thing of, are you allowed to follow opinions which create ease in Islam? And Sheikh Akram Nadwi, he clearly made that very clear, that not only are you allowed to do it, but you ought to do it. You ought to create ease for other Muslims. This upset a lot of people. The second question was about, is there an obligation to have a caliphate in Islam? That Sheikh Akram Nadwi and myself, we clearly responded that there is no obligation in Islam to have a caliphate system or an empire system, that these things were just contingencies. The main thing was Muslims connect with their Lord. Yes, when they live together as a society, society has rules, and Islam had kind of given certain rules, but it was never out and about to try to establish empire. And in fact, empire has a lot of harms because it always takes religion down the road of institutionalization. Now, so we clarified that. That obviously upset certain people, especially groups like Hizb ut-Tahrir, incredibly upset them. And they were really more so upset that, I mean, they knew that I was going to say that anyway to that question, but they were really upset that Sheikh Akram Nadwi, and, you know, may Allah preserve him and bless him, had also said that. Right now, then there was a third question, that that certain things like, because if there is no obligation for this ideal utopian Islamic state, there are certain laws in Islam which are seen as, unfortunately, they clash with modern day ethics. Would Islam, does Islam have the capacity to change its laws with time? Does it have this inbuilt mechanism? And I responded by saying that Islam actually mandates, it actually demands that its laws reflect the ethics and morals of the age. And part of this expansion, which I demonstrated, I said in the clip, so those of you that haven't seen that clip, please do. It's only a 5-6 minute clip. I explain in that, and do like it, share it, get it out there. Alhamdulillah, we have had some incredibly positive feedback as well. It is important sometimes because what manifests to a lot of people is the hate, because it's easier to spread hate. And I do get a lot of supportive private messages. I get loads, alhamdulillah, and people are always kind of encouraging me, and that kind of stuff is important, and especially it's good to put it out there as well. So it's good to, if people can leave positive kind of remarks, so just for other people, because knowledge is important, but common knowledge is just as important. So sometimes it's not only important to know something, but to know that people know that you know it is also important. So do kind of share and like. So I responded by, to give you, for those of you that haven't watched the video, in demonstrating that Islam was always meant to reflect the ethics of its age. You see, its ethics always varied between times and civilizations. So you have, Allah says that about each prophet, لِكُلٍّ جَعَلْنَا, that we placed for all of them, that Allah placed for them a sharia, وَمِنْهَاجًا, and a methodology that varies. So each and every prophet had something unique for them. I mean, some of them may have come in the same place, so they were just confirming each other. But generally, whenever they were part of a different generation, there was variations. Now, I mentioned that this could never have then been the objective. So Ibn Ashur in his tafsir has a whole section, lengthy paragraph, several paragraphs dedicated to saying that alcohol was always permitted before Islam. Now, I know some people may disagree with that, but he is a legend to me, and one of the greatest mufassir, the commentators on the Quran that has been. He has a tafsir, a commentary in 30 volumes, and was deemed the Shaykh al-Islam of the Malikiyah. Now, he has a lengthy section elaborating on how alcohol was always permitted prior to Islam. And he mentions that through biblical sources, we even see that there's a likelihood, he says, a strong likelihood that prophets of the past also drank. So he says that we can't say with certainty, but their traditions seem to demonstrate it. But what we do know is alcohol, wine, was not prohibited before. We know that certain foods, certain animals with certain hooves and things like this were prohibited. They were seen as immoral for the people of Israel. But moral for us. We have seen that certain laws for certain people were different. So how is morality changing according to God? Because God is constant. So this, you see, it doesn't make any sense to use the abrogating method response, because the abrogating response makes sense only if you're dealing with the same generation or the same civilization, to say, well, okay, they're getting ready and then we're going to change it when they reach this stage. But those people never got to change it at all. So Bani Israel, it always stayed haram for them. But a different people come and, hey, it's not haram for them. And a different people come and, hey, it's halal for them. And a different people. And so the point here is, this goes to show that laws were never the objective in Islam. Okay, they were never the objective. They were simply solutions to people's problems in line with their ethics of the age. And it's important to understand what we are. And this is God in general. This, in my understanding, this is what you could term the God of Abraham. But God, although I disagree with the way God is presented in the Old Testament, that is not my concept of God. This Yahweh that is presented, who is very kind of condoning of murder and genocide and all these kind of things. God, as I understand him, is the absolute in terms of compassion and mercy. That is God. So the picture that definitely the Old Testament has, and unfortunately some Muslims have as well, unfortunately many Muslims might have, is that of God in the Old Testament. They have a picture of this kind of mental image of Yahweh from the Old Testament. And that is not my understanding of God or Allah. Allah always tells us, the Prophet always reminded us, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, the most merciful, the most compassionate. This is God. Okay, and people might say, yes, but he has other names. But yes, but those names are at times used to kind of bring people into check, just so to kind of intimidate and threaten people, so as to prevent them from oppressing other human beings. So that's where that definition comes. So anyway, in this clip I highlighted that laws do change, and scholars have argued this, and I bring about a scholar from the 8th century. I think in the clip I accidentally said 7th century, but I do follow it up by saying in the 700s, 700 Hijri calendar, Islamic calendar. And he lived from the mid-700s into the 800s, mid-late 700s into the 800s, and he's from the 8th century of Islam, Islamic calendar. His name was Abul Qasim al-Burzuli, and he was an amazing scholar of his time. He was amongst the Maliki ulama, and he was called also Shaykh al-Islam in his time. So he was a great scholar. Now he gave a ruling saying that the penal code, the punishments in Islam, need to be substituted in his age. And he said they should be substituted with financial penalties. And this is, guys, those of you, right, don't worry about it. Unless somebody is actually trolling, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it, inshallah. Just inshallah, chill out with all the... Unless somebody is trolling, and then that's great. You can let me know and I'll block them. Otherwise, let's not digress. So those of you just tuned in, if you can share the feed so other people can benefit. If you have any questions, feel free to post them below. Now, I'm just currently explaining why some people are upset with a recent video I did highlighting that laws would change with the day and age, in line with ethical developments. Now, Abul Qasim al-Burzuli highlights that in his day and age, the hudud which today characterize the Sharia, and the Sharia characterizes Islam. So today, to all non-Muslims, and even many Muslims unfortunately, Islam simply means Sharia, which simply means the punishment code, which is like stoning people to death, which wasn't even introduced by Islam. It was from the Judaic laws. But anyway, cutting off the hands of the thief, doing things like this, lashing people. This is what they think Islam is all about. Now, these laws, right, generally in the world, like, okay, put religion aside, generally are considered like medieval, generally. Like if you just said, you're not speaking about religion, but you said, hey, some people in, I don't know, some remote region somewhere stoned somebody to death. That's seen as a very medieval, barbaric treatment. So the question is, wait a minute, this is in the Islamic tradition, does this change with the age? So Abul Qasim al-Burzuli had highlighted in his day and age, it's almost 700 years ago, that this would change. Okay. Now, some people got very upset that I quoted a precedent, because that gives strength to this argument. I also highlighted that, by the way, the Hanbali madhab has a very strong position in it, which has been deemed by Ibn Hajar as the apparent position of the Hanbali madhab, is that all punishments in Islam are dropped by simple repentance. And they base that on a hadith which is in the Musnad of Ahmad, where the Prophet said about somebody that was to be punished that halla taraktumuhu, if only you let him go, fayatubu Allahu alayhi, that he may repent, so Allah may repent to him, turn to him. Now, so if all punishments can be dropped by simply repenting, and that's one of the mainstream schools of law from the 4 mainstream schools of law within Islam, then what difference does it make if they're substituted? Like, it's not so much of a big deal anymore. Like, but because, right, this came as a shock. And firstly, most of these people had never even heard of Imam al-Burzuli. So all of a sudden, now that they've heard of him, they've become experts on him. What is hilarious is, before I mention him, nobody seems to even know. You know, it's like I was getting trolled on this. It's very disappointing, but on this WhatsApp group by scholars who are not trolled, but they were really just obsessed about me and trying to criticize me heavily. And they were trying to speak of different positions. And then this discussion came up about a particular opinion, which is a minority opinion. Now, they didn't even know that it existed. So they said, oh, that's nonsense. Nobody has ever said something. So actually, this was about, does the hellfire, is the eternality of the hellfire? So I mentioned that there's actually a difference of opinion on that. And Ibn Taymiyyah, believe it or not, actually held that view. And Ibn al-Qayyim surely held that view. And it's actually transmitted from some of the Salaf. Now, the people, first of all, said that there's no such view as this. You're making it all up out of thin air. I said, well, actually, I'm not. And then I show them certain things. They then, within the hour now, are refuting me and are experts on this topic. And I think, well, well, first of all, you didn't even know that these views existed until I just told you. And now, within a few minutes, you've become the expert on this topic. So now, okay, now I've blocked that person. That's fine, right? So now let's get back, backtrack slightly to this discussion. So Imam Burzuli had highlighted that, and now people got upset. So what they said, there's been some allegations that, oh, Imam Burzuli never even said that. He said, you're lying, you're misrepresenting him. He said, oh, this is if you can't establish anything to do with Islam, like you're in a region where there is no ruler, there is no government, there is no governance, then hey, rather than letting things just go, right, rather than letting letting rules and rights just go to waste, why not just take financial penalties from people? So what they're trying to say is that and I'll come to this, Iqbal, I'll come to this, but if you don't kind of troll, please. And I am drinking with my right hand, so just, Kadeem, you do that again, you're going to get blasted back into oblivion, so behave yourself. Right now, see, like, you make me lose my my train of thought here right now. So what they're saying, coming back to it, is that I'm misrepresenting Imam Burzuli. That Imam Burzuli never said that. He said that this is only in dire circumstances where there is no kind of Islam that is manifest. Like, it's just weak and there's no government, there's no laws. It's a lawless territory. This is what they said that Imam Burzuli had apparently said, and I am lying to people right now, keeping in mind that they didn't even know that who Burzuli probably was, or that he even had this opinion prior to me highlighting it, which I have known about this opinion and been researching it for years. So they've come across this within a few days. They've now become the experts on this, and they've told me that I've kind of right, so they've now become the experts on this. Okay, now, so I was going to highlight for you first of all, so let me just bring up some of these. Right, heresies of Abu Layth. Right, I'll come back to some of these, that Jesus may not return, and the hudud, the punishments in Islam, should be replaced. He says that in Abu Layth's distortion of I have blocked those people. I've blocked those people. Abu Layth's distortion of Al-Burzuli's view on hudud. A recent claim has been made on Imam Burzuli's view on hudud. Abu al-Qasim al-Burzuli, or he's sometimes referred to as Abu al-Fadl al-Burzuli, but Abu al-Qasim al-Burzuli of North Africa, blah, blah, blah. Right. Let's just get to... He dictated a fatwa to his students on the subject, so was then shared amongst the ulama. An 11th century scholar further elaborates on this, blah, blah, blah. Al-Burzuli's view was that in places where the ruler has no power to enforce had punishments on criminals, but is able to impose monetary penalties rather than leave such crimes unpunished, it would be permissible for him to resort to imposing monetary penalties. This is about the desert dwellers, the Bedouins of Africa, and the lands distant from civilization. So this is what they're saying Al-Burzuli was actually saying. This is the claim, yeah? That if Al-Burzuli was advocating what Abu Layth claims, why did he limit his discussion? Right, so anyway. Right, now, let's... Right, so if anybody's trolling, I will be blocking them. So let's take a look at this right here. This is, obviously it's backwards because the camera is reversed. Those of you that have just tuned in, inshallah, like, click, share, inshallah, get this out there, let other people benefit. And if you have any questions, post them and I'll get to them. So this is a nawazil, which are like fatawa that occur with the day and age. That's what they called. This is known as Nawazil al-Jadidat al-Kubra. You have this by Sheikh Mahdi al-Wazzani. Right now, This is also known as Al-Mi'yar Al-Jadid. Okay, so why Al-Mi'yar Al-Jadid? Because this author, by the way, he was passed away less than a century ago, so in the early 1900s he passes away, but was an amazing, legendary scholar of his time, and was seen as one of the major kind of Maliki encyclopedia. He was like a living encyclopedia of his time, lived in the Maghrib. So Mahdi al-Wazani, Abu Isa, right now, he is from my teacher's teacher. So, and some of my asanid go through him in fiqh and these other things. But anyway, that's a different discussion. Now, several centuries ago, in the towards the end of the 8th century in Islam, so we're talking about 600-700 years ago in Islam, there was a North African scholar by the name of one Sharisi who wrote a book called Al-Mi'yar, the kind of standard. And in this Mi'yar, he compiles fatawa that are contemporary crises. And he puts them together of scholars from three, he says, Al-Mi'yar al-Mu'rib, min fatawa ulama al-Andalus wal-Ifriqiya wal-Maghrib. So from the scholars of Al-Andalus, Muslim Spain, and from the scholars of Africa, and Africa then was heavily referred to as what is modern day Tunisia, and Al-Maghrib, Northwest Africa. So now this one Sharisi wrote that book, and I do have that up there. It's in about 12 different volumes. It's published 10. I mean, it could be, depending on which publication, you can get it in anything between 8 to, depending on the edition. Now, so Al-Mi'yar al-Mu'rib was issued. Now, that was awesome because it preserved several texts and articles which were written by scholars and may have been lost to just the vicissitudes of fate if it wasn't for him putting them into his book. So his book kind of preserved several articles. Now, because they're dealing with contemporary issues, we're seeing a lot of their version of modern, for their age, mindset. Now, that was brilliant because it was up to his age, which is about 600 years ago, over 600 years ago. But what about after that? Because Muslim Spain collapses and all of this, and times change again. So along comes Sidi or Sheikh Abu Isa al-Mahdi al-Wazani, and he compiles Al-Mi'yar al-Jadid, the new standard. And in this, which is also in print, this edition has 12 volumes, but other people can, other editions may vary. Now, in this, he compiles those fatwa, those rulings that were issued from one Sharisi's time, after his time, up until Wazani's age, which is just almost a century ago. So we've once again got, he kind of like bridges that gap. So it's awesome, right? So this is an incredible encyclopedia on contemporary day-to-day issues that people were facing in that part of the world, which is Northwest and North Africa. Okay, Muslims and how scholars were dealing with them. Right, now, so in here, Sidi al-Wazani or Sheikh al-Wazani brings this whole discussion of Al-Imam al-Burzuli. Those of you who've just tuned in, if you click like, and if you can share the link, get it out there, let other people benefit, inshallah. So he has a whole discussion which spans several pages. And it's not to say that he necessarily agrees wholeheartedly. I'm not saying he necessarily agrees wholeheartedly with what Burzuli is saying. However, he does bring the entire discussion. And just to show you, I want to just to kind of bring this to your attention. Now, just to give you an idea, Right, so this is right going to here. So you've got almost from page I mean there's some kind of an intro, like some discussions leading into it, but almost from page 204 going all the way to page, you've got all of these pages in the middle here, all of these going right up until page 237. He's just discussing this. Right, so this is what he's actually kind of discussing in all of these pages. Right, now right, so just to kind of like clarify. Now in here he's bringing that, is it permissible? First of all, there's this rich discussion on are we allowed to take the money of people? Now this is an important discussion because in the past, you see, now this is ironic, because in the past the way ethics viewed things, people's property was more valuable than their corpus, than their body. So in the past people would, for example, they may go out on a war or an expedition, or they've come back, they've lost a limb, but hey, I've got a goblet made out of gold. Alhamdulillah. Like this is, and this wasn't just Muslims, this was a mindset throughout the world, that people's property was like such a, and I don't mean by property actual land, but their actual belongings was so precious to them, that can the sanctity of that be violated? So he has this huge discussion showing that whether that can or can't, and the Maliki kind of scholars who have argued for or against over the time. But I don't want to go into all of that. What I want to highlight is where he speaks about Imam Burzuli. Now, so on page 210, he highlights that he brings this whole discussion that تحدث للناس أقضية بقدر ما أحدثوا من الفجور. This statement going back to the Salaf, Abdullah going back to Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, who was the ruler of his time, the caliph of his time, who said in Medina, he stated that the laws will continue to change as people continue to change with what they create as mischief or doings. Now, based on this, he says that ما أحدثوه من العقوبة بالمال وأفتى بجوازها أبو القاسم البرزلي. So Abu al-Qasim al-Burzuli says you can punish people through taking their finances. Now, he then brings a poem which is known as Al-Amal al-Fasi, but he follows this up. Right now, but with the words of the scholar Al-Qadi al-Umayri, who has a commentary on that poem, and he says وَمَا أَفْتَى بِهِ الْبُرْزُلِي مَالَ إِلَيْهِ ibn Khaju wa ibn al-Uqda. So Ibn al-Uqda and Ibn Khaju are like contemporaries and slightly junior to al-Burzuli, and they support him in this position. وَقَدْ كَتَبَ بِهِ لِلسُّلْطَانِ, and they have written with his ruling to the ruler of the time, Mawla Muhammad ibn Muhammad al-Sharif al-Susi, وهو نازل بوادي سبو قبل أخذه لفاس. So whilst this ruler before he takes, anyway, and he says وحاصله, the summary is أنه راض بفتوى البرزلي, and that he is pleased with this fatwa of Burzuli. And then he mentions أن البرزلي وقعت له مناظرة لبعض أهل وقته بمحضر أمير أصره. That he mentions that contemporaries have highlighted how Burzuli debated this point before the king of his time. Now tell me, how can Burzuli issue this fatwa for when there are no governments and there's lawlessness, but he's debating it before the king, trying to convince the king of his time. And he says, حَتَّى قَالَ مُنَاظِرُهُ right, so he says, and he debated with somebody who disagrees with him. And then he mentions, فَعَمَلَ الْأَمِيرُ عَلَى قَوْلِهِ. Right, now the Amir had taken the position of Burzuli. Then he mentions he took the position afterwards of this other person who his name is Ibn Shamma. He opposes, he's a Maliki as well, opposes Burzuli. فَصَاحَ النَّاسِ. And then people flipped لِإِقَامَةِ الْحُدُودِ الْبَدَنِيَةِ, for going back to those hudud. That there was chaos. And he says, وَكَثَرَ الْهَوْلِ, that there was huge chaos because of that. وَالشَّغَبْ فَانْتَقَلَ إِلَىٰ قَوْلِ الْبُرْزُلِي. Then he went back to Burzuli's opinion. Who is this? This is the king. Okay. Now, then he mentions, look, وَقَدِ اتَّسَعَ فِي الْقَوْلِ الْفَقِيهِ مُوسَى الْوَزَّانِي. Right. Now, so I just want to, because there's so much to quote, but I just want to mention key points. Right, that kind of show what is going on. Right, so just to highlight, because there was so much here. There is also a point where you have scholars like Al-Burzuli, like Sidi Mayyara. You have even Wazani highlighting that, look, you can't deny that what Burzuli is speaking about. So they mention here, ذكر البرزلي في نوازله عن ابن عرفة أنه كان يسهل ويرخص. And they say that Burzuli quotes other scholars preceding him, trying to show how they believe that you could violate the financial sanctity of people based on reason. So this is how he's and the whole discussion really is to do with ismatul amwal, the sanctity of wealth, and you can't kind of violate that. That was the core issue of their time. Now check this out. Now, وَحَاصِلُهُ مَا عِنْدَهُ مَنْعُ الْعُقُوبَةِ بِالْمَالِ. So obviously some scholars disagree and they إِلَّا أَنَّ كَلَامٍ. Now check, this is Sidi Mayyara highlighting إِلَّا أَنَّ كَلَامَ الْبُرْزُلِي مَفْرُوضٌ. That kalam al-Burzuli is to do with مَعَ وُجُودِ الْإِمَامِ وَتَمَكُّنِهِ مِنْ إِقَامَةِ الْحُدُودِ. This is in the presence of an imam and his capacity to establish hudud. وَإِجْرَاءُ الْأَحْكَامِ الْأَصْلِيَةِ عَلَى الشَّرْعِيَّةِ عَلَى أَصْلِهَا. That this is based on the presence of an imam who is fully capable of establishing that, the older, or whether you want to say the original rulings of the Sharia. Then Sidi Mayyara disagrees himself and says that no, وَلَا شَكَّ أَنَّ الْعُدُولَ عَنْهَا, that doing this, he feels, is changing the Sharia, and that shouldn't be acceptable according to him. Now, then Al-Wazani is highlighting, أما عند عدم الإمام وعدم التمكن من إقامة الحدود وإجراء الأحكام على أصلها. He says, as to if you had no imam or you had lawlessness, فَوَاللَّهُ أَعْلَمْ أَوْلَمْ. This is more deserving. مِنَ الْإِهْمَالِ وَأَدْمُسْ زَجَرْ, and so on. And he goes on to say that that's obvious, that he also mentions that قلت, this is Sidi, you've got Al-Wazani saying وَقَدْ يَشْهَدْ لِجَوَازِ الْعُقُوبَةِ بِالْمَالِ حَدِيثُ التَّنْفِيلِ. That maybe this hadith supports what Burzuli has said about violating people's finances. That there's a hadith of Prophet during warfare that مَنْ وَجَدْتُمُوهُ يَصِيدُ فِي حَرَمِ الْمَدِينَةِ فَخُذُوا سَلَبًا. If you saw anybody, not to do with warfare, if you saw anybody violating the sanctity of Medina, the sanctuary of Medina, by hunting, because they're not allowed to hunt, then whatever they have, you can snatch it and confiscate it. So he's showing that this is also an evidence. Okay. Now, he goes on to now he then quotes also Sidi Al-Arabi Al-Fasi. Now Sidi Al-Arabi Al-Fasi is also very passionate about Al-Burzuli's fatwa, but he does have the caveat. He does have the stipulation in saying that, oh, this should be where there's not lawlessness, but a weakness in Islam. Like we can't establish the older rulings, then we definitely should stick with Burzuli's fatwa. He also highlights, this is also him who's arguing for this, but with that stipulation. He says, إلا أن كلام البرزلي مفروض مع وجود الإمام وتمكنه من إقامة الحدود الشرعية وإجراء الأحكام الشرعية على أصلها. Same thing, he's quoting it again. That he says, except his position is, he's reinforcing this, is with an imam who is fully capable of enforcing the Sharia. Now, he says that this then, he says that, so if that's his position, Burzuli's position, Al-Fasi, Sidi Al-Arabi Al-Fasi comes a century or two after. He's after Al-Burzuli. He says that, وَالْمُجِيزِ لِلْعُقُوبَةِ بِالْمَالِ فِي مَسْأَلَتِهِمْ. Those like Burzuli and Ibn Khaju and Ibn al-Aqda, those people who said that you can do it like that, في هذه المسألة, in our opinion, where we're saying that, okay, you can do it where there's a weakness in establishing Islam, من باب أولى وأحرى, that they should definitely agree with us. Because they're saying you can change the Sharia punishment codes anyway. We're saying at least you can change it when Islam is weak. So he goes on to highlight his position. So people, you can see, and this discussion then carries on for pages and pages. It carries on. Now he's quoting other scholars, other discussions, that where you can take wealth and stuff like this. Now they keep going back to the point of Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, that تحدث للناس أقضية بقدر ما أحدثوا من الفجور, that rules will always continue to change. Once again, this is Sidi al-Wazzani. He says, وقد رأيت في أجوبة منسوبة للشيخ أبي جعفر ابن النصر الداودي, and that's obviously an old one. جوابا أفتى فيه بجواز العقوبة بالمال. He says that he shows that I've seen an old. He says I've seen a fatwa, and Ibn Nasr al-Dawudi is classic, almost from almost 1,000 years ago, where he also gives the fatwa that you can not to change the hudud, but you can violate financial kind of the wealth of people based on as a punishment. And then Al-Wazani goes on to say, وقد كان زمانه زمان هرج وفتن وتعصب من القبائل, and his time was obviously went through a lot of civil unrest. فإن صحت نسبة الجواب إليه, then he says if this is valid for him, it's because obviously you couldn't establish that kind of lawfulness in their time. And then he mentions محمول على اعتبار تعذر الحكم بغيرها كما في زماننا هذا, as is our day and age. You can't kind of establish this either. وَأَمَّا الشيخ أبو القاسم البرزلي. Check this out, people. He says, وَأَمَّا أبو القاسم البرزلي, as to Burzuli, فَقَدْ أَجَابَ بِجَوَازِهَا. He has said this was permissible. عَلَى الْإِطْلَاقِ, unrestricted. This is so this now, and then he says, look, he says he disagrees with Burzuli, and I'm not saying he agrees with him, although he accepts it if there was lawlessness and stuff like this, but at least he's being honest. He's being honest in what Burzuli has said. And he says, وَقَدْ رَدَّ النَّاسُ عَلَيْهِ ذَلِكَ وَهُوَ حَقِيقٌ بِالرَّدِّ. Right? And then check this out. He says, and I feel he deserved that refutation of not people saying, oh, he's lying and being personal against him, but people refusing to accept. So some people refused to accept that ruling of his and said that the Sharia can change with the day and age. And he says that, look, إلا أنه استدل للجواز بأدلة يمكن إجراء بعضها في جوازها مع تعذر الحكم بغيرها. Except Burzuli uses certain fatawa. Somebody's asking if I'm Salafi. No, I'm Maliki in madhab, which he says you can definitely use for in situations of lawlessness. This is page 225, volume 10 of the Nawazil al-Jadida by Sidi al-Wazzani. Right now, and then he says that, you know, if you want, we've kind of gone over this so many times here. And then he also says that, look, وَيَلْزَمُ الشَّيْخ الْبُرْزُلِي الْقَوْلُ هُنَا بِالْجَوَازِ مِنْ بَابِ أَوْلَى. So what we're saying, Burzuli would definitely agree with it, min babi awla. It's more deserving that he would agree with it. So, and then he carries on. This debate hasn't even ended yet. It carries on, like I mentioned. And he's quoting Sheikh Mayyara again, and he's doing this. Now, the reason I've brought all of that up is to show, look, I mean, do I, this allegation, oh, I've made this up. That first of all, I made up this scholar or saying things which he never said. Then, okay, because they found some things he said, they couldn't deny that he said it. But, oh, Burzuli was talking about when there was lawlessness and there was this. No, he wasn't. Sidi Mayyara was being transparent. Sheikh Wazzani was being transparent. These people were just being honest. Sheikh Al-Arabi Al-Fasi was being transparent. These people who followed him were just being transparent. Look, they even disagreed with him. They even disagree. Somebody asking about where I've studied, just check my bio in Facebook in the About section. I've covered it so many times. Now, so what's happening is, look, let's be honest about things. Let's be objective. Look, I know it hurts you that these opinions have existed because it challenges your perspective of Islam. But so what? You don't have to accept what he's saying, but don't lie. Like what you're trying to do is you're trying to say, I'm lying about him and, oh, I've misunderstood him. I haven't misunderstood him. Yes, do I accept that some people may try to attribute that to him in trying to say, oh, like try to justify that, no, I'm sure he may have meant it like this. I accept that. Why would they do that? Some people may do that because he was such a great scholar. He was called Shaykh al-Islam in his time. Now, you see, to them it may bother them, and because it disagrees with their views, therefore they would give an interpretation to it. Oh, I don't know if he really meant it like that. Maybe he meant it like this. And I get that. Some people may have done that. But these people have been very transparent. Sheikh Wazzani, Sheikh Al-Arabi Al-Fasi, Sheikh Sidi Mayyara. Sheikh Al-Arabi Al-Fasi and Wazzani at least accept with some caveats the whole discussion. They say in situations of lawlessness. But all three disagree with Burzuli in his absolute unrestricted nature of changing the hudud. But they're at least honest in saying this is what he said. It's alal itlaq. He said it generally. Ibn Khajur, who was an amazing scholar of his time, and like slightly junior to Al-Burzuli, and he has a summary of Burzuli's fatawa as well. He completely agrees with him. Ibn al-Uqda completely agrees with him. This was adopted by the king of the time. This was also adopted by the Tunisian king of his time, who, in front of who Al-Burzuli debates this issue with Ibn Shamma. So I just wanted to highlight that, look, I haven't been misrepresenting Al-Imam Al-Burzuli. I've just been saying that this is... Now, another point that is raised here is, oh, but what if Burzuli meant this for different reasons? We know he's saying it should change in his day and age, but is he saying it because of the ethics? Well, look, he's saying it very clearly, that in this day and age, it should change. Now, you can... you're just simply trying to get into his mind And you have the right to do that. You can get into his mind, and you can kind of try to say, well, I think he's doing this, but that's simply your subjective position, right? You are obviously superimposing something upon him because it doesn't settle well with your worldview. I get that, but that's not the way, that's not being objective. That's not being independent or critical or being analytic. That's just being very biased. So I just wanted to highlight that because it's important that there were a lot of people trying to discredit what I had kind of said in my video clip. And they were saying that, you see, it doesn't bother me that they discredit me, as in they disagree with me or they refute me or they do things. But they were trying to say that I'm lying in what Burzuli is saying, that I have no precedent in this. And that is not true. I do have precedent. And Imam Burzuli and Ibn Khaju and Ibn Aqda and all these people were of that opinion. So, and there were a lot of people that asked me this. They messaged me privately. They sent me the link. So there you go. That gives that kind of response. Now, so I want to finish that over there. Now, I will in time do a detailed video on trajectory hermeneutics, okay, how the laws change with time. But before, so just finishing the Imam Burzuli discussion, but just touching up on trajectory hermeneutics. You see, people, trajectory hermeneutics means that the Sharia it has inbuilt mechanisms to be malleable, to be flexible and reflect its day and age. This is built upon the understanding. This is built upon the understanding that laws in themselves, you see now there's a great there's a great fallacy of thought. People assume that these laws per se were divine, divinely sought after. That is not correct. You see, now you got to understand something, so I need you to focus, just in case some people say, oh, I'm Look, there is a distinction between revelation, which is divine, and between what is being revealed, the content being sought per se, like because and in and of itself is the divine kind of will. So, for example, Allah is revealing laws that I'm going to break this down for you. Laws are solutions to people's problems. That's what it is. They are solutions to people's problems. The laws are meant to reflect that in its age. Allah will reveal them through revelation. So, for example, the people, let's say, at the time, they used to cut off the hand of the thief. So Allah reveals this. Was this the sought after thing since the beginning of time? Was this the divine? So for example, if, let's say, the Quran was being revealed in Sweden in the 20th or 21st century, would these laws be the same? Let's take an example of the blood money. The blood money in Islam, most of these laws in Islam were already being practiced by non-Muslim Arabs before Islam came along. Most of them. So let's take the blood money as compensation. In almost all of the seerah books that you get in Ibn Hisham and all these other seerah books, they will speak about before when the Prophet's father was born, Abdullah. So the Prophet ﷺ, his father Abdullah was born. His grandfather, in some narrations, the 10 sons he had, in some narrations, whatever it is, but he drew lots. That he had asked God that if my child lives to a certain age, what I will do is I will draw lots, and if all 10 of them reach this age, or all my children reach this age, I will draw lots and sacrifice one of the children, the actual sacrifice them to the gods. Not to Allah, but to the, or like I will just, sorry, to Allah, but I will sacrifice him to God. Yeah. So now what happens, and this is in all the seerah books, there's a slight variation in the narration. So you might get some that, whether it was one son or all the sons or whatever, but the story is more or less the same. Now, when he draws the lot, that is drawn for Abdullah, the father of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That the grandfather Abdul Muttalib has to sacrifice him. So he doesn't want to, because that son Abdullah is really beloved to him. So what he says is that, according to some narrations, he says, well, I won't do that, but what I'll do is, in place of that, the Quraysh used to have a practice, I will sacrifice 10 camels. And I'll draw these lots again. Right now, so he does it again, and it still ends up on Abdullah. And he does it again, and it ends up on Abdullah. And he does it again, and it ends up on Abdullah. And he says, no, I don't want to, he says, I don't want to sacrifice this son of mine, so I'll keep giving camels until it reaches 100 camels. And then he says, that's it, I'm just going to sacrifice these 100 camels. In other variations, he just, from the beginning, decides to sacrifice 100 camels instead of Abdullah, and it's not 10 times. This practice of 100 camels, the whole of Quraysh adopt this practice. Right, so this becomes the blood money that Quraysh have, and this is way before Islam, way before the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is even born. Now Islam comes along and it just condones this practice. It just condones saying, okay, that's the blood money, 100 camels. In the hadith of Amr ibn Hazm, there's a letter where the Prophet ﷺ advises that what is the blood money. And it begins with that mi'atum min al-ibil, that 100 camels. Right, so this is what it actually begins with. Are you telling me that the Messenger of Allah did not know that other regions in the world exist? Of course he did. He knew that there's regions like China, there's regions like India, Hind, there's regions in Africa, there's regions. Are you telling me the Messenger of Allah did not know that there were no deserts in other parts of the world? Of course he did. Are you telling me the Messenger of Allah did not know that these other faraway regions don't have camels? Of course he did. Why is the basis for the blood money, for if it's supposed to be for the entire world, a practice established in Jahiliyyah, in non-Islamic periods like what are known as the dark or ignorant ages, why has that become the Islamic divine ruling? How has this become the divine ruling? Why is the Prophet, people will say, yes, but the Prophet also said you could give 1,000 gold pieces. Yes, but afterwards, everybody says that the basis, the firm basis was the 100 camels. Why is the Prophet not saying, oh, by the way, 100 camels is if you live in Arabia, for those who live in China, other parts of the world where they don't have camels? And yes, the Prophet does say later on in the hadith about, about 200 cows and things like this, but for the people around them. Why is he not addressing the people of the world? Now, that's because this practice was already the practice before Islam even came. So Islam is just condoning what was already there. So revelation condones. But this practice of camels per se is not something since time immemorial Allah was solely after per se. He wasn't. So if the Quran was being revealed in, and Islam was being revealed in Sweden, let's say, in the 21st century, the Prophet wouldn't say, can you give 100 camels? That wouldn't even come into the discourse. This is because it was relevant. So the problem, that the fallacy is, because it's in revelation, people think it is divinely sought per se. Now this is the important distinction. Revelation is sacred. Its content is sacred from a religious viewpoint, but its content is more importantly relevant. That's the distinction. The distinction is the content, its primary goal is to be relevant. You see, the Quran by its content could be speaking about Fir'aun, it could be speaking about Abu Lahab, it could speak about many things. The Quran as revelation is sacred. The rulings per se are relevant. They're not necessarily sacred from a divine will perspective. This is where the fallacy of thought comes into it. People think, they kind of deify. They take these rulings to be God. So now to change them you're trying to change God all of a sudden. That is the mistake. That is the mistake. Now, trajectory hermeneutics shows that, look, Allah reveals, for example, a clear verse in the Quran saying how to give sadaqat and zakat. How to give إِنَّمَا الصَّدَقَاتُ لِلْفُقَرَاءِ وَالْمَسَاكِينَ. And Allah says, وَالْمُؤَلَّفَةِ الْقُلُوبِ. And those who are interested in Islam. Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu an in his time says, no, this ruling doesn't fit our age anymore. And he changes it. He says you can't give it to them anymore. Many of the ulama, including the Hanafiya and other people, say this is abrogated. Now, when did it get abrogated? Oh, it got abrogated in Umar's time. How does Umar abrogate the Quran? They say, oh, well, maybe he knew of something. No, this is trajectory hermeneutics. In his time, he felt that. I'm not saying we have to agree with him, but this was the methodology, the way of looking, the way of thinking. The same thing with slavery. Now, the Prophet always encouraged the freeing and the emancipation of slaves, with the aspiration of setting a trajectory that a time will come when the ethics of the people will develop and enhance to such a stage where slavery will be outlawed and will then become haram. Do you know, I got into a discussion on this group with ulama. It was so disappointing. Charlie Dixon, I'm going to come to that question, and I have answered it on YouTube already. The wife of the Prophet was in her late teens, and I will come back to that. Right, so now I got into a discussion where people tried to say to me, that slavery inherently is not immoral. What the hell are they on about? How is slavery not immoral? Snatching somebody's wives and children and making them your property. That is utterly unacceptable. It is haram in our day and age. People will say, right, so, so what will you say about that day and age? We are talking about our day and age. It is now immoral. I'm not saying whether it was deemed immoral by them. Ethics vary. The ethics of age varies. So people today, we clearly see this as unethical. This is haram. It's not. Some people commented on my thing saying, yeah, but Islam doesn't say slavery is necessary, so it's better not to do it. Better not to do it? What on earth are you on about? This isn't like saying, hey, do you want to eat a cheesecake? I don't know, it's not really too good for my diet. Like, I suppose it's better not to do it. What on earth are you on about? Have you lost your mind? What do you mean it's not better not to do it? It's unacceptable. It's despicable. You can't snatch people's children under any circumstance. So this is the argument. Given some circumstances, You can snatch people's children and wives and turn them into your property. No, you can't. Under no circumstances can you do that. And then somebody said, well, oh, I heard this lecture as well, and these guys are they said, oh, yeah, but we're not talking about like the US Atlantic trade, you know, the Atlantic trade slavery. We're talking about slavery like in Islam, where slaves had rights. I said to them, my friend, kidnap and rape is still kidnap and rape, even if you're giving them 3 meals a day. It is still kidnap. It is still rape. It is still utterly unacceptable. It doesn't matter if you put them in a 5-star hotel. If you've kidnapped them, you've kidnapped them. You know, if you're raping them, you're raping. It doesn't make it okay because you're giving them food to eat. So this is the most absurd kind of logic. And then somebody said to me, oh, right. Somebody said to me, oh, well, they're not really slaves. We don't call them slaves. These were scholars arguing with me on a group. They said, oh, these are not, we're like, Islam says you're like the caretaker. I said, are you for real? Caretaker. Don't beat around the bush. Everybody knows what bloody slavery is. Don't try to kind of like give it this veneer of caretaker. If somebody snatches your kids, right, calls themselves, I'm a caretaker. What do you mean caretaker? So you can't, this is nonsense. This is absurd. Don't try to lie and twist your words to beautify this kind of ugly brutality in this day and age. It is haram. Right, guys, enough with the desserts. Enough with the desserts. Pay attention. Pay attention. And if you've just tuned in, share the feed. Get it out there. Let other people benefit. You can post any questions. But it's important you stay focused. Enough of these. No more of these kind of those dessert-related digressions. Right, so, look. It's... Alaykum salam, ahlan wa sahlan. The thing is that, look, right, so I will be blocking some people if you carry on like that. Right, so now this is what is important. Right, this is what is important. That as the age goes by, the laws have changed. I ask you, how do you prohibit slavery? How do you outlaw slavery unless you accept that ethics change? Unless you accept trajectory hermeneutics? So, otherwise you have to agree with slavery inherently not having a problem. So this is something, some food for thought. I'm putting that out there. And the important thing to understand is that, look, rules, laws were only meant to be solutions to people's problem. Don't confuse the vehicle, which is revelation, which is sacred, as a vehicle for what it's saying. Because what it's saying may be just a ruling which is relevant for its age. Like, for example, Allah says in the Quran about preparing a defense strategy. وَأَعِدُّوا لَهُمْ. Prepare for them. It's a commandment in the Quran. مَسْتَطَعْتُمْ. To the extent of your capacity. مِنْ رِبَاطِ الْخَيْلِ. And Allah says prepare horses. Horses, He's telling you, as your defense. Today, nobody would disagree with me that, oh, but that's not talking about, in our day and age, we would prepare military tanks and kind of like airplanes, and like we would have kind of military jets and other kind of nuclear power and things like this. That today, the military aspect is different. You wouldn't prepare horses, even though Allah is saying it's a clear verse in the Quran. It's not ambiguous. But they would say, yeah, but the day and age has changed. But I would say, oh, but revelation is sacred. They will say, yeah, it's sacred, but It's the spirit that's important. So this is why it's important to understand that, look, right, Charlie, no, I do not believe that the Prophet Muhammad traveled on a winged horse. I've answered that. It's on YouTube. So that's to give you guys some kind of context to all of this, okay? So it's important to understand these things so as not to confuse, and also will make sense then why Islam condoned a lot of a lot of practices from the days of Jahiliyyah, the days of ignorance, because it was relevant to their time. And it was relevant to the people around him. Not because God, from time when, before God created the universe, he wanted people to give 100 camels. That's not what, that wasn't the intent. Otherwise God would have put camels all over the world. God would have put, did God want since time immemorial to people to cut off their hands? Not at all. So these things are just contexts. And it's worth, and I highlight to people that it's worth taking into consideration. Look, things like the oldest documented law we have today, the oldest documented law we have for human beings is the law of Hammurabi. Okay, one from the ancient kingdoms of Babylon. Now, Hammurabi, who dates about 3,700 years ago, his laws that he has documented, and they're still today preserved in kind of clay and stone. Now, these laws date back to about 4,500 years ago. And Babylon was not dedicated to Yahweh or the one true God like that at all. They had their own gods. And Babylon, they attacked Israel, the ancient Israel, kingdom of Israel, and destroyed the whole thing. And they took the Israelites. It's important if you pay attention to this concept. They took many of the Israelites captive and took them back to Babylon, to Mesopotamia and these places. Now, for generations, the Israelites lived under Babylonian rule. Before Moses, before Musa alayhi salam came. Now, did you know in Hammurabi's law, which you can check out online, you can go to YouTube, word for word, verbatim, you have the law, an eye for an eye. That is in Hammurabi's part of his law. That he mentions a tooth for a tooth, that if anybody loses a tooth, you will take the tooth of the other person. He does also, he is also very, in Hammurabi's law, they do distinguish between the rich and the poor. The rich are kind of okay, but the poor, you definitely do this for. He mentions an eye for an eye and things like this. Now, because the Israelites lived under the Babylonian kingdom for generations, it's only natural. This is way before Moses. This is way before Musa alayhi salam is even born. Before Musa alayhi salam. Now, it's only natural. It is only natural that they would have incorporated these understandings and these morals of like an eye for an eye, because Hammurabi and the kingdom of Babylon had these already. Therefore, in their time, because this was their moral and ethical standard, Allah affirmed it for them because it was relevant to them. So revelation came down being relevant to the Israelites who had lived under Babylonian rule, whose laws we already have. Right? No, I'm not saying that. No. Hammurabi and these laws existed in Babylon. So Hammurabi's laws date back to about 4,500 years ago. Moses was not around 4,500 years ago. Okay. Right. Moses, whether you want to say 3,000 years ago, just over 3,000 years ago, was Moses. Now, before Moses, the kingdom of Solomon and after Solomon, the kingdom of Israel was kind of destroyed and attacked. And the temple of Solomon was attacked. And this is all before Moses. and the tribes of Israel are taken, and I'm not saying, and they kind of disheveled, but they're taken to Babylon as well. So this does take place. So there's huge Christian discussions on this already. You can Google the Christian discussions on they feel what that, there's a discussion was they would say was Moses or the Old Testament taken from the laws of there's a discussion, did they just cut and paste them? I'm not saying that they cut and paste them from the laws of I'm not saying that they cut and paste them from the kingdom of from Babylon, but they were definitely influenced. That's what I'm saying. Okay, so just to clarify that. Okay, now, so this discussion exists in Christian kind of doctrine already. So my point is, anyway, coming back to this, right, my point is that this naturally, a people laws must always reflect a people of their time. That's the point of this discussion. So when in the Quran Allah mentions an eye for an eye, he doesn't say that this is what the law is. He doesn't say that it's an eye for an eye. He says, وَلَقَدْ كَتَبْنَا فِي التَّوْرَاتِ, that in the Torah we prescribed this. Why doesn't Allah just say, hey people, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا اعلموا, know, أن العين بالعين, well, sinna bisin, know that an eye is for an eye and a tooth is for a tooth. Allah says in the Torah we prescribe this. Because for the people of Israel, the Israelites who lived under Babylonian rule would have naturally been influenced, and this would have been the moral kind of standard of their age. Anyway, let's move on. Let's take some of these questions, people. That those of you that are asking about the Q&A, I'm coming to that, some of those questions now, but these were very important. Okay, right? Yeah, of course. And nafsa bin nafsi wal aina bil aini, and so on. And of course, Ismail. Right. So the point is that these things about these laws were from that time. Right, I think Sheikh Ad-Dadu, Muhammad ibn al-Hassan Ad-Dadu, is an awesome, amazing scholar of this time. But I just want to clarify as well, Dawood, I'll come to your question. Right, I want to clarify that there seems to be, you see, Muslims, unfortunately, we seem to have this kind of very black and ultra black and white way of things, of looking at things. Right, so Muhammad Ahmed, I've just spent the last 1.5 hours answering that, so please watch this later on. Right, now, the Muslims, we have this way of looking at things that when they ask you, do you like somebody or do you rate somebody? And you say, yeah, like I love that person, I rate him. They now all of a sudden assume that, aha, but he says this, got you. It's like, like, are you, are you like mentally like handicapped or something? Like, I understand. Like, what the hell is wrong with you? Like, look, just because I rate and respect somebody doesn't mean I'm their clone. Like, people stop doing somebody, I highly respect Sheikh Sidi Abu Uwais Bu Khubza. He's an amazing scholar. I went to visit him in his home, incredibly hospitable. He hosted me for several hours a few years ago. He lives in Tatwan, in Morocco. He met people like my hero, like Ibn Ashur. And he has links from Sidi al-Wazani and stuff like this, dating back through his teachers like Abdul Hayy al-Kattani, who was an amazing muhaddith, and he himself is committed to hadith. His lifelong commitment to the study of Islam has me in awe of him, and the way he rates all of these and has collected chains, and he's a student of Sidi Ahmed al-Ghumari, and he's his son-in-law. I mean, he's really old now, he's in his 90s, and I have some photos with him on my Facebook. So, and I'm saying this guy is a Don of Tatwan. So somebody said, Don of Tatwan, well, he doesn't agree with your rulings on this. I mean, I'm sorry, are you on disability benefits? Like, what on earth is wrong with you? Just because I rate his commitment and his devotion to Islam and his lifelong study and pursuit of sacred sciences does not mean that I'm now bound by his opinions. So please do not try to kind of, you're not going to trip me up with these kind of things like, hey, do you rate this person? Aha, nate, you know, he, however, says this. Well, and your point is, okay, he says that. Am I now his mental, am I enslaved to him mentally? I mean, like, you know, so let's get back to some of these questions now. I had to say that because people, they have this kind of childish mentality, and it's really annoying. So some people, they post on my, those of you just tuning in, people, if you can click share, get this out there, and let me respond to some of your, somebody has asked on the Mahdi and Dajjal and the Antichrist and Christ and the second coming of Jesus and the Mahdi, and I've highlighted in much detail in a previous discussion. You can find it. It may be already on YouTube, but it's definitely on Facebook. I've highlighted that, look, Ibn Ashur has mentioned that these things are not from Islamic creed. They are what he calls Ma'arif Islamiyah. This is in his book, Tahqiqat wa Anzar fil Kitabi wa Sunnah. You can go to the book, you can read it. He has a discussion on the Mahdi in there. He mentions, look, people like Ibn Khaldun, the famous Maliki scholar from several centuries ago, he discredits this whole concept. People in the early 20th century, late 19th century, scholars like Muhammad Abdu, Sheikh Rashid Rida, all these Mashaykh of Al-Azhar, Abu Zahra, you've got Mustafa Al-Maraghi, you've got people like Sheikh Mahmud Shaltut, all these people have a huge discourse on this. And they discredit, they do not accept that Jesus will be coming again, or this kind of Dajjal, Antichrist, or this Mahdi. They say these things and they give their interpretations to them. Okay, so the Mahdi, there isn't a single Sahih Sarih hadith that is established to prove it. Jesus, they highlight, Abu Zahra highlights how this most likely, he has a detailed article, and the others discuss it as well, how this most likely was from Judeo-Christian sources, that those early Muslims who were most likely Christian that had become Muslim, when they embraced Islam, they used to give narrations of the prophets, and this is most likely misconstrued as a narration from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when in essence it was actually from their sources. And they go into all this detail to demonstrate that. And when you look at this, it is interesting, because even the things that are said, this thing of Jesus coming down from the sky, this would just end the whole of faith, really, because there would no longer be, it would just be empirical data. Everybody say, hey, well, people, Jesus is here, and Jesus would just say, I'm Jesus, everybody believe in me. And then the purpose is, look, according to the narration, he will he will break the cross. Okay, fine, break the cross. Kill the pigs. I mean, kill pigs. Oh, just asking, what have pigs done? Like, okay, we don't eat pigs. According to the school of Medina, pigs are not impure. According to Imam Malik and the whole madhab, no living creature is impure. Why are we killing pigs? Like, I don't understand. Like, what is the... And then He will kill the Jews. What the hell? Kill the Jews? Why are we killing the Jews? What? Because they killed Jesus. And the rock will say, oh, there's a Jew behind me, come and kill him. Like, what kind of nonsense is this? If rocks are speaking, what kind of world are we even living in anymore? So this is why Islam has been mocked. So I highlighted, look, these are the views. Ibn Ashur mentions, this is not from Islamic creed. Sheikh Mustafa al-Maraghi mentions, look, if a person wants to believe in these things, that's their thing. If they don't want to believe in them, they don't have to. This is not Islamic creed. This is not Islamic aqidah. Okay. So that's the whole point. I mean, me personally, I'm inclined to what these scholars are saying. That's my understanding. That, you know, these kind of things contradict the clear verses and the clear understanding of the Quran. An event so big as a man descending, a prophet of God descending from the cosmos, coming through and everybody's watching him, onto a manara, a minaret, which, by the way, the concept of minaret didn't even exist in the prophet's time. It was a later invention, but he's coming down on a minaret and then he's going to lead people in prayer and the whole world is watching. There's no longer a test. It's no longer faith. This is empirical data. They could do DNA tests and check that it's Jesus. So there you go. End of debate. And this is never mentioned in the Quran. Never. Like, God doesn't even say, okay, by the way, wait till Jesus comes. God doesn't ever mention this. Not even once. So it's interesting. So these kind of things. Right, so I mentioned Ali ibn Sa'ad. This is from the book of Ibn Ashur called Tahqiqat wa Anzar fil Kitab wa Sunnah. You can read. He highlights this belief in the Ashratu Sa'a, in all of the Ashratu Sa'a. Following his discussion on the Mahdi, he says the entire Ashratu Sa'a is Ma'arif Islamiyya. It is only Islamic information. It is not from our creed. So whoever wants to believe can believe. Whoever doesn't want to believe doesn't have to. If you check his tafsir under the verse of the Quran, when Jesus is saying to God, that, you know, when Allah says in the Quran, "Anta qulta lahum," did you say to them? And where the verses where Allah is saying, "Inni mutawaffika wa rafi'uka ilayya," that I will be giving you death. Mutawaffika, mutawaffa, tawaffi in Arabic means to kill, like to take life. That inni mutawaffika wa rafi'uka ilayya, God is saying to Jesus. Under this, Ibn Ashur shows that how Imam Malik, according to the Utbiyah, believed that Jesus died on earth a natural death. So my point is, there is diversity in this. No point, there's no need kind of flipping and becoming all kind of... Anyway, let's get to some of these questions, people. Fire away. I know there's been... Does God mention it? It appears, it's subject to interpretation, but that verse, Hasib, which I just read, demonstrates by the apparent that God gave Jesus death on earth. Right, anyway, so, and this other thing, you know, it's interesting that this belief that Jesus is up there, it's almost like a divinity thing, isn't it? That God is up there, Jesus is up there. So anyway, I know this will bother a lot of people. I'm not saying you have to disbelieve in it. I'm just saying that, look, these things, they're not from Islamic beliefs. If you want to believe, it's not from Islamic creed. It's Islamic information. If you want to believe in it, you can. If you don't want to, you don't have to. Did he die on the cross? No, those Muslims who feel he died on earth feel that he died a natural death. Jesus was most likely put on the cross, but not successfully crucified. So that's and where the verse says, وَمَا قَتَلُوهُ وَمَا صَلَبُوهُ وَمَا قَتَلُوهُ, this verse that they did not kind of manage to successfully kill Jesus. That's what it means, successfully. Not that they didn't manage to put him up on the cross, but they didn't manage to successfully crucify him. And as to the verse like, وَإِن مِّنْ أَهْلِ الْكِتَابِ إِلَّا لَيُؤْمِنَنَّ بِهِ, except they will believe in what? Him or it. Because Allah has used the pronoun he, which can mean it. وَإِن مِّنْ أَهْلِ الْكِتَابِ إِلَّا لَيُؤْمِنَنَّ بِهِ قَبْلَ مَوْتِهِ. That some people who say Jesus is coming again, they've said that this bihi, there are no people of the book except they will believe in Jesus before Jesus' death, قَبْلَ مَوْتِهِ. But that's not what the verse means. Except bihi, there are no people of the book, إِلَّا لَيُؤْمِنَنَّ بِهِ, except they will believe in the truth, قَبْلَ مَوْتِهِ, before his or her death, as it becomes manifest to them. So as they are dying, they will realize that, truth, as in the truth of things, reality will dawn on them. So that's what it means. Anyway. Right, God is up there, the birds are up there too. No, Hussein Ibrahim, God does not, birds are not in the cosmos. I don't know what kind of a concept of the universe you have out there, by the way. So, birds. And I thought, I'm buzzing. Birds are up there. Voyager 1 is going to come across birds. No, so God is beyond the cosmos, as in he's beyond the universe, and there's birds up there. Birds are within our within our atmosphere. They're in the sky. They're not outside of the universe. Okay. So, anyway, right. Can a Muslim woman give a talk to a mixed audience at an Islamic conference? My former teacher at Deobandi was really disturbed when I told him that we had organized an event where we were going to invite a famous sister to give a talk. He gave me a look of disgust, and said it was absolutely prohibited. Right, I don't affirm modality for Allah, but what I'm saying is that there are no... God, however you picture him, I'm sure you picture him transcendent. Birds are not transcendent, okay? I don't even believe that I'm having to even explain this. Okay, God is transcendent, birds are not transcendent, okay? You know what, my friend? Put in an application for disability benefits. You will definitely be entitled. Right, so anyway, God is not a man, Steve, but the pronoun he may be used, and that's just language. Right, so anyway, right, so this blocked. Right, so, right, can women give a talk in front of a mixed gathering? Of course they can. Of course they can. Right, so women can give talks, men can give talks. I understand that this scholar wasn't too pleased with it, but that's obviously their cultural influence. Okay. Do we believe in the splitting of the moon in two? Steve, I've answered this in previous questions. People like Ibn Ashur, the famous commentator on the Quran, who I've alluded to just moments ago, he highlights that although many Muslims, and this phenomenon was transmitted en masse, that many people said they witnessed this, we do not deny their witnessing, we affirm their testimony, but did the moon actually split? He alludes to that it most likely, it didn't actually happen, but they witnessed this. Why did they witness this? And he goes into several explanations to do with things like whether there were certain asteroids, or whether there was a lunar eclipse having an impact, or whether it was the atmosphere that we don't. And that's how today how science also views things, that people's perceptions are not discredited, but the reality is discussed. So if you feel that you witnessed something, fine, that's your experience. We affirm that, as an experience, but what was the reality, the scientific reality to that? So Ibn Ashur mentions in his commentary on the Quran, speaking about the moon splitting, that the moon didn't actually split, most like that's what he says that people feel it did, many Muslims say it did, but he says that that was simply their experiencing of it, their perspective. The reality is it didn't actually happen. So that's, but at the same time he says that because that was their perspective and they said that, it was seen as a miracle because the Prophet, as he kind of alluded to the moon, it appeared to split. And so hence it manifested as a miracle because the Prophet didn't say, hey, I'm going to do this. But as he alluded to it, it appeared as though it was split. So it did. So it was relevant and it served its purpose and it affirmed the faith of the people. The Prophet didn't say this is going to affirm your faith, but it helped and aided them, and therefore their experience is accepted. But scientifically, Ibn Ashur says that that isn't most likely what happened. Right, so, but there may have been other things that gave rise to that phenomenon. Right, so this Isa, this question, yes, women can give a talk and that's not a problem. These are cultural perspectives on Islam. And the Indo-Pak culture and the Saudi Arabia culture is a very Puritanist culture. And you have to understand that their culture of religion is very Puritanist. Let me rephrase that. Their culture of religion is very Puritanist. So that's why they feel that women, you can't even see them, you can't even, you can't even look at them, you can't even, and everything becomes so awkward, and then they have extreme segregation, which breeds perversion to the max. So it's completely antithetical to the whole purpose of modesty. It is natural for men and women to always be attracted to each other. It is natural for us to share the same environment. It is natural for us to be attracted. Hence, people are going to be attracted, so they're going to have relationships, they're going to propose, they're going to get married, they're going to... These things, obviously, you're going to do that because you like people. Like, they like you. It has to work like that. So, yeah. Sharif asks a question. If a girl goes into hayd around 8 before teens, does the Sharia really hold her as an adult? Of course it doesn't. The Sharia has not hinged a girl being an adult based on her going into a menstrual cycle. Many of the scholars have said in the past, when do we deem somebody legally liable? So they have said this is based on mental discernment, the capacity to differentiate, reason, al-aql. But the problem with al-aql is you can't gauge it. I can't gauge your reason. So they said, well, okay, what is something that we can gauge? So they said, well, okay, how about puberty? So people who are pubescent will be deemed as adults in the past. Now they just put an age on it, and many Muslims in later times, like the Ottoman state, it just placed an age which was 15. And many of the scholars, the traditional scholars, actually said 15. And some of them said 18, like 1,200 years ago, they said 18. This age was actually used, and they said 15. But if puberty was very manifest on the person, that then you could treat them like an adult. Without knowing, because if I'm buying and selling, and if I'm doing things, I can't gauge whether you are a person of reason, but I can just gauge by your appearance. So a girl is not deemed an adult, and it is not halal to marry a girl, underage girls. It is categorically haram. It is forbidden in Islam. This thought is disgusting. It is an abomination, and it is an affront to Islam and to the honor of the beloved messenger of Allah, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who was a paragon of mercy, an epitome and of good character, that today some Muslims are supporting inadvertently the claims and the propaganda of right-wing extremists in saying that the Prophet was in loving sexual relationships with a child. That is disgusting. Disgusting. they're trying to inadvertently support this claim that the Prophet Muhammad was a pedophile. And I am utterly so disappointed with those Muslims that support that. You have shame on you. You throw and compromise the honor of the Prophet just because of your allegiance to Imam Bukhari. The Prophet is above all. He's above Imam Bukhari. He's above Imam Muslim. He's above all of these people. Do not dishonor the Prophet just because, oh, you're going to lose a legal debate in methodology, or because I believe that, oh, that a hadith is always sahih. I don't give a damn if you believe the hadith is always sahih. You do not dishonor the Prophet, call him, argue for him being a pedophile in a sexual loving relationship with a child. That is disgusting. And I can understand far right, extremists, fascists holding that view, Islamophobes holding that view. I can understand that because they unfortunately they have this hatred towards Islam, and I get that. Some of it may be because of how Muslims behave, and some of it may be, I believe, based on a misunderstanding of Islam and a lack of interaction with true Muslims. But I cannot fathom why Muslims are doing it. I encourage all of you to watch my video. It is on YouTube. It is a detailed video going in detail, elaborate detail on the age of Isha at the time of her marriage. And I clearly demonstrate through Quran, through sunnah, through historical evidences, through logic, through reason, through jurisprudence, through all of these things I demonstrate in almost 2 hours how it is utterly unacceptable to say she was a child. She was in her late teens. What age? We're not sure. It may have been anything between 17 to 19, but she was in her late teens. And that is proven. And I give those accounts, so please check them out. Right? And please check them out, okay? Now, because it is, seriously, we've got to stop doing this. We've got to stop doing this. Right, next question. Do you have to get married? No, you don't have to. Oh, you mean me? Well, Sammy. Right, so this is, yeah. How about the social norm back then to marry young girls? Okay, Muhammad Ahmad, that's a good question, and I tackled that in my thing. That yes, they did marry younger than today girls, but not young girls like that. Marriages then they weren't normally marrying 6-year-olds and 7-year-olds. They were not doing this. Yes, girls like 11, girls like 12 did used to in the past get married. Like even maybe up to 100 years ago, girls probably did things like that and people got married. But they didn't used to marry 6-year-olds and 7-year-olds. Even in the fiqh books, they clearly write that, oh, if you look under the discussion of, there's a detailed discussion, I mentioned it in there anyway, about what kind of brings these laws of prohibition and stuff like that. But in my video I mentioned it. But the thing is that they mentioned, what about 7-year-old girls? They say this is what they say, 7-year-old girls do not even come into the imagination of sexual desirability. They mentioned this in their legal discourse centuries ago in the books. Hundreds of years ago they mentioned this. So they do not marry girls back then that young. So what is the difference between, now today it is utterly unacceptable to marry any girl that is 11 or 12. It's unacceptable. But what I'm saying is, in the past, throughout the world, did people marry girls that were 11, 12, that had been past their puberty and they were nubile? Well, based on certain customs, people did do. Not everybody did that, but yes, it did occur as a phenomenon. I'm not justifying it. I'm not trying to justify it. But what I'm trying to say is that it occurred as a phenomenon that may have been found in several parts of the world. Like in England, the legal age was anything over 10 at a certain point. Now, I recognize that, but what I'm trying to show is that this wasn't even found historically as in any region as a norm. So the reason I'm mentioning that here, somebody's saying, why are you mentioning the distinction? I'm mentioning because people are trying to argue that the wife of the Prophet being a 6-year-old or a 7-year-old, and that wasn't even the custom in any of those regions. It wasn't even, you don't get reports like that. So just to clarify. Okay, people always use the phrase, let's have a sit down before marriage. Where did this term come from? And is this sunnah? Sharif, I'm not sure what that means. Let's have a sit down. I take it this means let's discuss things. I'm not sure what that means. So if that's what it means, there's no problem with that. I mean, obviously, if you're about to get married to somebody, I'm sure you're going to have a discussion. So, Ash Williams, please watch my video. I don't want to take more time. You know, I took 2 hours dedicated to a video which is produced in high quality for all of you on YouTube to watch for free. So I hope you benefit from it. It's called The Age of Isha, and you can search it, Mufti Abu Layth, Mufti Layth, Age of Isha, it'll come up. The Prophet made a famous speech at Mount Safa where he openly called people to Islam, causing Abu Lahab to become infuriated. How would you respond that this is proof to set up dawah stalls in city centres? Of course it isn't. The video is on YouTube. My video is on YouTube. Right, so this is not proof to set up stalls in... You see, when the Prophet called people to Islam, he climbed on this hill, this mount, and he said, Ya Sabaha, Ya Sabaha, which was a call that the people around him in Mecca used to use whenever they would call people. So today, like, you might send a broadcast list, or you might make an announcement on social media. So in the past, people in Arabia, in Mecca, they had this custom that if there was an important announcement, they would climb on a hill, and they would use these words, Ya Sabah, Ya Sabah, and they would use these, and people, and that meant an attack was imminent or something incredibly important. So people would gather, and the people gathered, and the Prophet told them that I call you to one Lord, to one God, that these idols are not your Lord. Now people, Abu Lahab, who was an uncle of the Prophet, kind of flipped at him and said, you gathered us for this? Like, what the hell is wrong with you? And he said, I'm not going to leave my gods, these idols. So the Prophet didn't used to do this regularly. He never used to stand on the hill and say, on the mount and say, Ya Sabah, Ya Sabah, and carry on doing that. He only did that as an initial announcement for all, because that was the way that people needed to know. And he wasn't going to go around initially telling everybody. So bring the people to him. They had a mechanism to do it. I'm not saying there's anything inherently wrong with having stalls. But the problem is this attitude that we've got today is anti, in my understanding, antithetical to Islam. It does a disservice to Islam, right? And most of the people who hold these stalls, I'll be honest with you, hold some sometimes crazy views on Islam. So he is blocked anyway, people, so you can ignore him. Right now, so this thing of should people do this? No, because you're not going to invite people are not going to come to Islam. But because they've seen some guy dressed like a foreigner with a massive beard telling you Islam is peace. It doesn't work like that. The greatest challenges to Islam today, I'm telling you. Okay, next point to take into consideration, people. Pay attention. The greatest challenges to Islam in the 21st century are threefold. One, they are reason. The capital R. Reason will be part of the greatest challenge to Islam, the way it's being presented. And this is to all religions, but especially Islam, because Islam, out of all the religions, world religions, is really the only one that kind of can hold its weight. Right, so that's reason. Second, ethics. Ethics will be the greatest challenge to Islam of the 21st century, of part of this trio. Because humanity today seems to have outperformed the ethics that people are promoting as God-given. Back then, yes, these ethics would have been ahead of their time. But today, if you're still promoting those ethics, they are now centuries old here. So people, or at least 1 century old. So people see that as like, those ethics are backwards. How could God be backwards? Surely God is all comprehending. Like he's all knowing. So ethics is a huge issue. And third is relevance. What does religion have to offer? How is Islam relevant today? This question, I can't see it being answered by hardly any people promoting Islam can't seem to answer that question. So these 3 things, that reason, ethics and relevance, are the greatest. This is the trinity that is in clash with Islam as it's being presented. So we need to make sure Islam, look, we believe Islam has stood the test of time, but it is our job to make sure that the true message of Islam reaches people. My YouTube is, you just search my name, Mufti Abu Layth, as you can see on Facebook. And this public profile of mine, do like it please, like it, share it, get it out there. Right, some people have opted for ta'wil of God's. Alright people, let's do a rapid round. Yeah, let's do some rapid questions. Some people have opted for ta'wil concerning body parts of God. Oh, I've answered this before in much detail. No, I do not believe in an anthropomorphic God. I do not believe God is like this man up there in the sky like that. He is transcendent. He's truly incomprehensible like that. But he's not a man. And yes, that is the view that the Salafis or the Wahhabis hold. And unfortunately, other Muslims have become influenced by that as well. Some other Muslims have. What is your opinion on the Khilafah Rashida? On Rashad Khalifa? I'm not sure what that question means. What is meant by the hadith, 2 deens shall not coexist in the Arabian Peninsula? You see, what the Prophet meant here was from a threat perspective. Because of the betrayal levels that had taken place, it was important as a military kind of, as a state level decision, if you like, that the Prophet said this. He did not say to kick out all the Jews like this. He did not say this. Because if that was the case, then why is the final, one of the last transactions of the Prophet when he went to buy bags of wheat, his last transaction is in Medina, is with a Jewish person, a Jewish trader who he actually leaves his shield with as a deposit. Sorry, not as a deposit. It kind of leaves it, pawns it with him to pay him for the wheat. And this is in Sahih Muslim. Why is the Jewish person still even there? So if the Prophet was trying to chuck people out, all the Jews out of Arabia, he would have had him chucked out rather than leaving your goods with him. Why not just confiscate all his things? The Prophet was in a position of power towards the end of his life, and this was his last final transaction, commercial transaction. Is it permissible to wash bugs? Of course it is. Come on people, get real. I can't get my head around this idea of the Quran is uncreated. This is an absurd debate. Is the Quran created or uncreated? It's absurd. And I think that the truth is, as Imam Shawkani said, look, these things don't matter whatever you believe. It's an incomprehensible. Everybody accepts that the Quran we hold, the Mus'haf, is obviously printed. It's a piece of paper. It's not. So what does this even mean, this debate? And I've answered this in the past, you can check it. Salam Mufti, what do you think of the ruling in Tunisia where Muslim women can marry non-Muslim men? This is interesting. Tunisia really seems to be leading the forefront on some of these. Some of my haters must be really attentively listening now. What is he about to say? We need suspense. Drum roll. What am I about to say? Come on, haters, pay attention. You see, Tunisia also passed the legislation on having equality between the genders in inheritance laws. So it also said that as well. And the Diwan Lifta, the office of giving fatwa, the official grand office of fatwa in Tunisia, and the Grand Sheikh, I think his name is actually Bittih, which sounds Battih, I think, which sounds similar to Bittih, which means like a melon. But he actually signed off on the fatwa, and he's a scholar of Islam, and you can find his fatwa online. Now, that's to do with the gender equality, and then recently they've passed this law of saying Muslim women can also marry non-Muslim men. Now, personally, I think you have to take this into perspective, that they are not telling Muslim women to marry, they're not saying anything. They're just saying that the state should not place religious restrictions on people. It shouldn't do that. And I, from that statutory perspective, agree that there should always be freedoms, that the state should never really get involved in religion. Because think about it, there's many non-Muslims in Tunisia as well, and there will be surely many Muslim named people who are non-Muslims too, but don't want to announce their absence of Islam. And Allah gives them the freedom to leave Islam if they want, contrary to what some of the clergy, through their institutionalized religion and trying to force people believe, that Islam actually gives you the freedom to leave Islam if you want. Now, there may be people who are not convinced by Islam and therefore have left it. If they wish, but they don't want to announce it because they don't want to get bloody killed. So if they want to marry a non-Muslim, that is their right. Or if other people, so the state shouldn't place discriminatory laws, because Tunisia actually states, I mean, this is what I watched anyway, so I don't know, I'm not a legal expert, but from the news reports that I've read, that it doesn't stipulate for men, that men can marry any person from any religion, but only women had this restriction. And that's not an Islamic ruling anyway. So if it was Islamic, it would be equal between the genders. So since this is like a kind of like a lopsided version, a cultural version of Islam, so, and the state shouldn't be imposing that. State has no business trying to tell you about your religion. This, and it's not enforcing, it's not saying you have to marry, it's giving you your freedom. So fine, you know, like people, it's up to them. Allah says, وَهَدَيْنَاهُ النَّجْدَيْنِ, we showed them the path. You can choose this path, you can choose that path. Like, why are people trying to control other people through statutory guidelines? Like, I completely abhor this kind of like institutionalization and enforcement of religion on people. It is so against the messenger of Allah, his da'wah, and the true spirit of Islam that he taught and left us with. Right, okay. Is it from the sunnah for a leader to consult with others before making a decision? Sure, I mean, this is from wisdom. I'm sure it's not mandatory, but I mean, it's from wisdom. I mean, if you don't have to be a leader, you can just be any human being. Allah says, وَأَمْرُهُمْ شُورَى بَيْنَهُمْ. It's always like He encourages us to consult things. There's a saying in Arabic that شَاوِرْ صِغَارَكْ وَكِبَارَكْ وَارْجِعْ إِلَىٰ عَقْلِكْ, that consult your elders and your youngsters, but always return to your own good reason. So, yeah, it's always great to consult. Mufti, ignore the haters. We love you. Shukran, man. I love you too, man. Mwah, I love you too. Shukran. I appreciate the encouraging, supportive words. Do changing baby diapers, cleaning them, break wudu? Not at all. Not at all. So that's absolutely fine. Hadith that the Prophet said if a woman marries herself off, it's invalid. He said this 3 times. This hadith has been problematized. And in the future, I'll try to maybe dedicate a video to this. I've answered this in the past with much more detail, so you can check it up there. That the Hanafi madhab didn't accept that, and according to several Malikis, Imam Malik didn't accept it either. So that's and I don't believe that, and that's my understanding, that you do not, a woman can marry herself. Absolutely. Where the Prophet said about having a guardian, this was as an encouragement. So it's a good thing to have family present, because it will ensure family ties. And you have to remember, the Prophet was addressing a tribal society where everybody was part of a clan. So that's important. Whoa, this question's way too long. I can't answer that. When does Isha end? Isha ends. Alex has asked a question. Isha ends before Fajr, before Fajr kicks in, as Imam Malik says in the Muwatta. He says that waqtu salah ma lam tadkhul al-ukhra, it is the time of one prayer until the next doesn't kick in, except for subah, except for the morning prayer. Right, so Mufti Saab, is a particular sexual thing allowed? Nate, you trying to, this person Rafe Tiwana is trying to not part of the Tiwana cartel, but this is trying to, no, this is Tiwana spelled differently, but he's trying to get me into a bit of trouble. Of course, look, anything, as Imam Malik's teacher said, that behind closed doors, any sexual thing, it's your business. He said, إِذَا خَلَوْتُمْ فَاسْنَعُوا مَا شِئْتُمْ, do whatever you want. Right, the Mahdi and Isha, I've answered this all before. How shall we prepare? Well, maybe you won't have much to prepare for, but I think you just need to be decent human beings. Ash Williams, good night, shukran, adios. Well, this is coming to an end anyway. Right, explanation on the rights of jima for a husband or mawla tahsin. What a detailed question. Look, people, it's common sense. These things are human, like, you just need reason, yeah, and common sense. That if you are in a sexual relationship with people, yeah, it's a sexual relationship. Obviously, husband and wife, it's a sexual relationship. So naturally, a key ingredient will be the actual sexual activity. But when you say rights, you see, you have the right to a warm, meaningful, loving relationship. And it doesn't mean you don't have any rights to force. You don't have any rights to abuse. Really, if you're in a relationship, you shouldn't instrumentalize sex ever as a tool of kind of exacting revenge, as in to withhold sex, to kind of be abusive. I mean, if you are, that relationship is only going downhill anyway. So people, the whole thing is to communicate, to try to understand people. Chop chop, let's get the show on the road. Okay. The hadith about a wife prostrating to her husband, authentic. He was covered in sores and she would lick it off. that part is definitely not authentic. But you see, you have to remember certain things. Everything has a context to it. Everything has a context. So it could be that at times, so for example, let's say I saw somebody disrespecting a teacher. So at that point I said, do you even know what the true value of a teacher is? A teacher is somebody that you could, almost prostrate to because of what he's imparting to you. This is an example of, like, everything may have a context. I mean, it does have a context. So if you saw a husband being, I don't know, discrediting or being unappreciative of his wife, the ruling would be the same in saying, do you know who this person is? She would be described as having paradise beneath her feet, as in according to the hadith. Now she would be potentially the mother of your children, that she would be this and this and this. She would be somebody that you could bow down and prostrate to, worship, as people worship beauty. But so this is the context. I believe that the same thing would apply for women, from men to women. So this hadith, although the Prophet is saying it to that person, that woman who's kind of complaining and being very kind of like unappreciative of her husband, I believe the same ruling would be for a man, that he could prostrate to a woman. So this is just a figure of speech to say that you know, if you truly appreciated what the other person does, that's all it is. So and it could be from any perspective. It doesn't have to be husband and wife, gender. It could be from a teaching status. It could be from many things. So I hope that's of some help. Whoa, people, whoa. We've covered way too much. Some of you must be incredibly... And a lot of these hadith are weak anyway, but I mentioned that just to kind of give some clarity that it works both ways. I would believe that, you know, this kind of like semi-worship someone is in terms, it's hyperbole in terms of truly appreciating them for whatever reasons you may truly worship. I shared a poem on Snapchat where it was an Urdu poet where he said अब तो है इश्क़े बुता में जिंदगानी का मज़ा जब खुदा का सामना होगा तो देखा जाएगा. He said that now the only true pleasure of life is in worshipping semi-divine women. The semi-divine beautiful women, worshipping them is the only pleasure left in life. As to our meeting with our Lord, we'll see to that when it comes. That kind of shows the attitude of the Urdu poets of the past. That was Akbar Allahabadi. So people, with that, I leave you to it. And inshallah, if you have, if you haven't liked my public page, do like it, leave positive feedback, share it. If you haven't watched the video I spoke of, the age of Isha, watch it. Tomorrow I'll be releasing a video on debunking myths on exorcisms. You can check the trailer, I've released it today. If you have any personal questions, you can reach out to me with them on Facebook, send a message on Snapchat, which is Malm 2014, MALM 2014. You can add me, you can send me your questions. I do try to respond, inshallah. Other than that, I leave you with the words that Subhanallah wa ta'ala amma yasifun, that Allah is transcendent and above that which they ascribe to him. Wa afdalu salati wa salam ala al-qa'il al-mamnoon, and the best of salutations and blessings upon the beloved messenger who has said, al-madinatu khayrul lahum law kanu ya'lamun. Indeed, Medina is better for them if but only they knew. With that, people, take very good care of yourselves, and I'll see you next week. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.